Making a custom night is no easy task. It takes a lot of people, a lot of skill, a lot of drive, and a lot of passion to even consider making a physical game. But the thing behind that drive, that passion, the real foundation for it is that concept, right? The idea the entire game is based on. Which is why when Ultra Discord Night came out last week, it was such a surprise to me, because its concept alone is kind of an anomaly, at least to me, because it's not a bunch of characters from a perceived franchise people are passionate about, or a faithful recreation of what made the original FNAF game so good. It's just a bunch of people. One guy was friends with, a bunch of people from a server, and it just took that concept and ran with it. And while there's nothing surprising about that on its own, once you begin to unpeel the layers, start to consider what people were thinking about during that time, the development behind it, the history, Ultra Discord Night becomes a lot more interesting, at least from my perspective. So with that, allow me, a former team member on Ultra Discord Night, to tell you why UDN is one of the most intriguing custom nights there is. So, first off, yes, I was a team member for the game. I rendered a ton of stuff a while back, most of which I assume is showing or cycling or wherever I decide to put it on screen. And while I'm not going to let my experience there change my upfront perception of the game, I think there's a lot to be said about the aspects of the game that have gone on behind the scenes. To start, I was first introduced to the game by a friend of mine, Spade, best modeler I know. And he pitched rendering for the game to me and a friend of mine as we were already rendering for Ultra. And with that, I joined the Ultra Discord Night team as an official renderer. And a little while after that, a few discrepancies started to emerge between the work I was putting out and what was expected in the game. And to kind of elaborate on that, I think it should be said I am the laziest person in the world. I get nothing done, and my least favorite thing to do is having to do something over again. And during my experience rendering for UDN, there was a lot more of that than what I expected. What that resulted in was waiting for the people in charge to get more comfortable with their ideas, so that way they could have it laid in stone before I had to go in and remake it. And while that mentality did save me some time, I think overall the environment it cultivated was disturbing, to say the least. And while I'm sure I'm the only one lazy enough to experience that on such a high caliber, the other team members rendering alongside me also felt a few discrepancies in the system. And overall, it forged a sense of division in the team, at least between me, and with that, I preferred not to stay in a space where I was uncomfortable working and honestly wasn't super enthused about the game itself. I knew a lot of the people in the roster, but I wasn't 100% down pat with the idea. And with that, I hope you can understand a little bit about where I'm coming from. But along with that, learning about the intent and the history of the game during that time kind of changed my perception of it. And to kind of understand where this is coming from, we need to take a look back at why the core concept of UDN is so odd to me. Because while having a game with all of your friends in it is cool, it creates a few distinct problems that can't be worked around super easily. The first one of which is just people getting mad, right? It's gonna happen naturally. When you make a custom night with real people, then the barrier for entry is non-existent of sorts, and in a game like Animator's Hell, that is less of an issue because the people in the game are well respected in a caliber beyond the average person. But in UDN, the problem itself lies in that there's no distinct criteria, right? It's just first come, first serve, whoever was my friend at the time stays there from now until the end of time. And while that doesn't create a huge amount of issues, I think the main one it creates that conflicts with the developers' ideas of the game was more or less that the game would not receive as much traction. And that is completely fine, right? The game doesn't need to be a huge smashing success for it to be good. But another problem that kind of clashes with is the people behind the game can have a direct influence on the people included or excluded from the game, which creates a sense of division, because making a custom night with real people means that people won't get included, and those people on their own are either apathetic or downright in opposition to the game, which, combined with the low traction of the idea itself, creates a huge problem, because you're not only creating a small group of people around your game, but you are downright dividing them by making actions against particular people. And what that means is over time, people begin to dislike your game, tell their friends about your game with a sour taste in their mouth, because the game itself had been passed through many hands, many directors, many developers, many teams, and the game's concept alone has changed so much between just petty controversies themselves. And that will happen with any game, but more especially with UDN, where the people behind it were passionate, but also very divisive and emotional. And for those reasons, the concept of having real people in a custom night with no barrier for entry is so weird to me, because while I'm sure it's been done before, the rate of success has not been cleared before. That barrier has not been broken, and so now with the game actually out and being a fairly well-made game, I think more than anything it's surprising to me. But another huge issue with that original premise is the reputation of the game riding on the backs of people who are in it. And this is a problem that Animators Hell hasn't even escaped from, because what having real people in a game means is that if somebody does something wrong, or something that doesn't align with your views, you kick that person out, which creates even more of a division, because for those people who are on the side of the person who was kicked out, or maybe if the decision was rash, downright removing content from the game, people will get upset about that, which creates even more of a division in a cultivated community incredibly small. What that also leads to is a lack of bolstering in the foundation of your game and the people around it. Because if you get to the point, and UDN has replaced a few characters already, but whenever it gets to the point that so much bad happens that the roster is undoubtedly different from how it was before, the game feels unstable. Nothing feels completely confirmed, and the rate at which you can change it creates even more of a need to get in, but also a desire to stay out, simply because the reputation of the people in the game changes the game itself. And that is the largest underlying issue behind why this concept, I believe, shouldn't work. That being said, UDN has taken this idea and they've proven me wrong. The game itself, I think, was an absolute treat to play, and saying this outside of the history and everything, I think its game mechanics work pretty well, but it's nothing to be scoffed at. The development time it takes to make something like this is incredibly large. I believe UDN was in development for about 3 years. The renders and models are absolutely top-notch, and the mechanics themselves are fairly stable, with a bug patch coming out, well, as of the time of recording this, just about every day. Along with that, the game has a plethora of secrets to unpack, and ultimately, I enjoyed it. While the characters themselves and the premise, I believe, is still very interesting, the gameplay itself is stable, the mechanics work, everything is, considering the game's rocky history, a very fun experience, and I highly recommend you check it out. Give this dev team some love, right? And based on that, I'm assuming most of the current team members are done with UDN. From some insider information, I know the main guy behind it wants a whole separate game, a spin-off, a bunch of content for the future, but simply releasing a game of the caliber of UDN is an incredibly high achievement on its own, and through all the work it took, I assume most of the team members probably want to move on to other things by now. Once again, I'm fully open to being proven wrong. Based on the caliber of the game alone, I feel like a sequel could be great. But as it stands now, I doubt the game will get much serious development from here, and I highly recommend you play it for what it is. And for those reasons, as a developer, I believe UDN is one of the most intriguing custom nights I've ever had the pleasure of playing. Hey, thank you very much for watching. My apologies that as of the last year, I have not been up to anything extraordinary or huge scale for YouTube. Obviously, I've been rendering for UDN, I've been rendering for Ultra Custom Night, and I'm actually making a game that will remain behind closed doors for now. That being said, we are coming up on 1,000 subscribers, which obviously I'm enthused about. Obviously, I have plans for something YouTube related then, but knowing my schedule, if that doesn't end up happening, thank you very much regardless. It has been nothing but enthralling. Anyways, I'm not going to keep you here for too long, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.